They were feared, revered, and thought to be wiped out by a great flood. But what if I told you that the Nephilim mentioned in the Bible never truly disappeared? What if they are still among us today, hiding? Welcome to Wisdom and Revelations Hub, where we explore biblical history to reveal hidden truths and fascinating stories. If you're new here, consider subscribing, and if you're returning, welcome back to another journey into the mysteries of the Bible. For centuries, these colossal beings have been thought to exist only in ancient texts and folklore. But what if I told you there's mounting evidence suggesting otherwise? From remote islands to the hidden caves of ancient civilizations, there are signs, fragments of truth that the Nephilim might still walk the earth. In today's video, we'll explore mysterious sightings, ancient artifacts, and the chilling stories passed down through generations. We'll examine how these giants, who once roamed freely, may still inhabit our world, waiting to be discovered. But be warned, the truth is stranger than fiction. Let's dive into the first piece of evidence that suggests the Nephilim giants are still alive. Have you ever heard of the Solomon Islands? Well, to truly understand the significance of the Solomon Islands and their connection to the giants, we need to delve into the story of King Solomon, a figure renowned for his wisdom, wealth, and influence. Solomon was the son of King David and Bathsheba, and he ruled over Israel during its golden age around the 10th century BCE. The Bible tells us that Solomon was chosen by God to build the first temple in Jerusalem, a magnificent structure that would become the spiritual center of Israel. Solomon's wisdom and wealth were legendary. In 1 Kings chapter 3, God grants Solomon unparalleled wisdom, saying,
"I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be."
Solomon's reign was marked by peace and prosperity, and he became famous for his judgments, such as the well-known story of the two women who claimed to be the mother of the same child. But it wasn't just his wisdom that made Solomon famous. 1 Kings 10 tells us,
King Solomon was greater in riches and wisdom than all the other kings of the earth. The whole world sought an audience with Solomon to hear the wisdom God had put in his heart.
His wealth was so vast that it drew the attention of distant lands. The Queen of Sheba, for example, traveled from the ends of the earth to test Solomon with hard questions and was astounded by his wisdom and the riches of his kingdom. It's believed that Solomon sent his ships far and wide to gather the riches of the world. According to 1 Kings chapter 9,
King Solomon also built ships at Ezion-Geber, which is near Elath in Edom, on the shore of the Red Sea. And Hiram sent his men, sailors who knew the sea, to serve in the fleet with Solomon's men. They sailed to Ophir and brought back 420 talents of gold, which they delivered to King Solomon.
Ophir was known as a region rich in gold, and it's speculated that Solomon's ships might have traveled as far as Southeast Asia, Africa, and even the Pacific Islands in search of wealth. Fast forward to the 16th century, when European explorers began navigating the uncharted waters of the Pacific. One such explorer was Álvaro de Mendaña, a Spanish navigator, who in 1568 embarked on an expedition to find the legendary lands of gold mentioned in the Bible. Following tales of vast wealth and drawing on biblical references, Mendaña believed he had discovered the source of King Solomon's gold when he arrived at the islands in the South Pacific. Mendaña named these islands Islas de Salomón, or the Solomon Islands, in honor of the biblical king, convinced that these were the lands from which Solomon had obtained his vast riches. Although the gold Mendaña sought was never found in abundance during his lifetime, the name stuck, and the islands have been known as the Solomon Islands ever since. The Solomon Islands are now known as a remote and mysterious archipelago in the South Pacific, famous for their breathtaking landscapes and rich cultural heritage. But beyond the beauty lies a darker, more enigmatic side, a land steeped in legends of giants. For centuries, the native inhabitants of these islands have passed down tales of colossal beings known as the Nephilim, who once roamed their land. These weren't just stories to them, they were historical accounts of encounters with creatures of unimaginable size and power. Now, you might be wondering, wasn't the flood supposed to get rid of these giants? Let's dive into what the Bible and the Book of Enoch have to say about the flood and the persistence of the Nephilim afterward. The Great Flood, as described in Genesis, was meant to cleanse the earth of its wickedness, including the giants that roamed it. Genesis 6 states,
"And behold, I, even I, do bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life from under heaven, and everything that is in the earth shall die."
This flood was a divine judgment meant to wipe out not just humanity's sins, but the corrupted bloodlines that included the Nephilim. However, despite this catastrophic event, the Bible makes a curious note in Genesis 6, saying,
"There were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown."
This verse explicitly states that the Nephilim existed both before and after the flood. The Book of Enoch offers further insight into how these giants could have persisted. It tells of fallen angels who taught humanity forbidden knowledge and fathered the Nephilim with human women. When the flood came, the physical bodies of these giants may have perished, but their spirits were said to have lingered on, continuing to influence the world. But the Bible provides more proof of their post-flood existence. We see this in the accounts of Goliath, the giant defeated by David, and King Og of Bashan. Goliath, described in Samuel 17, was 6 cubits and a span, roughly 9.5 feet tall. King Og, mentioned in Deuteronomy 3:11, had a bedstead made of iron that was 9 cubits in length, over 13 feet long, emphasizing his enormous size. These giants living in different regions were descendants of the Nephilim, suggesting that their lineage somehow survived the flood. Appearance-wise, the Nephilim were described as being of immense stature and strength, often towering over regular humans. They were not just physically imposing, but also played significant roles in the conflicts and stories of ancient Israel. Now, let's talk about Guadalcanal, the largest island in the Solomon chain, where locals claim these giants still reside. Pay close attention, guys, because Guadalcanal, the largest island in the Solomon chain, is at the heart of these legends. Here, the locals speak of giants with long, dark hair, fiery red eyes, and immense strength, beings who lived in complex cave systems beneath the island. These giants were said to be so large that they could traverse the island underground without ever being seen by the surface dwellers. But what makes these tales so compelling is the sheer consistency and detail in the descriptions. Witnesses describe these giants as standing over 10 feet tall, with long, coarse hair and a terrifying presence that struck fear into the hearts of all who encountered them. The giants were not just mythological figures. They were part of the daily lives of the islanders, who had to navigate the dangers of living in close proximity to these beings. Now, has anyone heard of the book called Solomon Island Mysteries? Well, this is where one of the most compelling accounts comes from. Marius Boirayan, an Australian helicopter pilot and engineer who lived on the Solomon Islands for several years. In his book, Solomon Island Mysteries, details the stories he heard from the natives, including the chilling tale of Mango, a woman who was kidnapped by the giants and held captive for 25 years. Apparently, one of the giants had taken her captive as his wife. I'm definitely not surprised, but anyways, when Mango was finally found, she was unrecognizable, hysterical, foaming at the mouth, and pregnant with the child of a giant. When Mango gave birth, the people in her village, including herself, realized the child she gave birth to was a half-breed. When her son turned 5, They had to make a big decision so that history would not repeat itself. So, one of Mango's brothers ended up killing her half-breed son. Obviously, Mango herself ended up dying soon after. These stories aren't just confined to the modern era. Ancient cave drawings on the islands depict massive beings interacting with humans, often in positions of power or dominance. Archaeologists have uncovered tools, weapons, and even skeletal remains that suggest a race of giants once lived on these islands. Some of these remains are so large that they defy explanation. Oversized skulls, massive jawbones, and gigantic footprints etched into the rock. You might be thinking now, okay, where is the evidence? We need evidence. Well, I'm glad you asked. After all, legends and myths are powerful, but to truly understand whether giants like the Nephilim ever existed, we need to turn to something more tangible: evidence. Over the years, archaeologists and anthropologists have uncovered a variety of artifacts, bones, and tools that suggest the existence of beings far larger than the average human. Let's dive into some of the most compelling discoveries that point to the reality of these ancient giants. In the Solomon Islands, as well as other parts of the world, there have been numerous reports of the discovery of gigantic skeletal remains. One of the most famous accounts comes from Lovelock Cave in Nevada, where archaeologists unearthed bones that were much larger than those of a typical human. These remains, which included a jawbone that could fit over a modern human's face, were reportedly linked to the Sitka, the red-haired giants of Paiute legend. In Africa, there have been discoveries of enormous footprints fossilized in rock, some of which measure up to 4 feet in length. These footprints, found in places like South Africa's Mpuluzi region, have sparked debates among scientists and researchers. Some argue that these could be evidence of an ancient race of giants, while others believe they could be natural formations or distortions caused by erosion. However, the sheer size and distinct human-like shape of these footprints make it difficult to dismiss them entirely. Another fascinating piece of evidence comes from the discovery of oversized tools and weapons, some weighing hundreds of pounds, far too heavy for an average human to wield. These artifacts, found in various locations, including the Middle East and South America, suggest that they were made for beings of extraordinary strength and size. For instance, in the region of Basra, Iraq, a giant sword was unearthed, measuring nearly 12 feet in length and weighing over 100 pounds. Such a weapon would be impossible for a regular human to use effectively, further indicating the presence of giants. But it's not just physical artifacts that provide evidence. Ancient texts, like the Ethiopian Bible and the Book of Enoch, describe giants in great detail. These texts not only speak of their immense size, but also of their influence on early human civilizations. The Nephilim, as described in these writings, were not just tall. They were described as mighty men of old, men of renown. Their presence had a profound impact on the societies of their time, shaping myths, legends, and even the architecture of ancient cities. In the Solomon Islands, the stories of giants are backed by the islanders' accounts of vast, unexplored cave systems that run deep beneath the islands. These caves, they say, are the homes of the giants, allowing them to remain hidden from the modern world. While many of these caves have yet to be fully explored by scientists, the accounts from local tribes and the occasional discovery of large bones and artifacts lend credence to the idea that something or someone may still be living there. Now, you might think, the evidence is good and all, but does that mean these giants are living with us right now at this very moment? Let's delve into some of the most compelling modern-day evidence. Reports of giant sightings continue to emerge from various parts of the world, particularly in isolated regions where human access is limited. From the deep jungles of South America to the vast wilderness of the Solomon Islands, eyewitnesses claim to have encountered beings of extraordinary height and strength. One such recent claim comes from the Solomon Islands itself. In 2023, locals reported seeing enormous footprints, far larger than any humans, near the entrance to a hidden cave system on Guadalcanal. These footprints led to speculation that the giants, long thought to be mere legends, might still inhabit the island's rugged interior. Although these claims are difficult to verify, they align with the long-standing oral traditions of the islanders, who have always maintained that these beings exist. In addition to the islands, there are reports from the Amazon rainforest, where tribespeople and explorers alike have spoken of encounters with extraordinarily tall beings who live deep in the jungle, far from civilization. These giants are said to be incredibly elusive, avoiding contact with humans, which could explain why there is so little concrete evidence. What makes these modern sightings so intriguing is that they often come from areas that are difficult to explore and are less influenced by global culture, meaning the chances of these being mere fabrications are lower. The consistency in the descriptions across different regions and cultures also adds weight to these accounts. So, I've told you about the sightings, told you about the connections with other cultures all over the world, and told you to subscribe to our channel and like this video as well. But what I haven't told you is a military account from soldiers who swore they fought giants in the Solomon Islands and were lucky to be alive to tell the story. The Battle of Guadalcanal was a military campaign that took place from August 7, 1942 to February 9, 1943, on and around the island of Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands. This was during World War II. It was the first major land offensive by the Allies against the Empire of Japan. On August 7, 1942, Allied forces, mostly U.S. Marines, landed on Guadalcanal, Tulagi, Florida Island, and the southern Solomon Islands, with the goal of using Guadalcanal and Tulagi as bases for a new campaign to eventually capture or neutralize Rabaul, which was the main Japanese base on New Britain, which was successful. Between August and November, the Japanese made several attempts to take back the island almost every day. There were 7 big naval fights and air battles that finally led up to the decisive naval battle of Guadalcanal in early November, where the last Japanese ships were sunk. The Japanese came up with a plan and tried to attack the island from the sea and land enough troops to take it back. But in December, they just gave up on retaking the land and evacuated their remaining forces by February 1943. Even the Allied troops were shocked and surprised. And here is where the story takes a strange turn. It turned out that the Japanese troops were fighting 2 different enemies at the same time. The Japanese troops who were stationed on these islands are said to have seen huge creatures, giants-like beings that were 10 to 15 feet tall. Not only were these being seen by the Japanese soldiers, but they also fought the giants, but their weapons had no effect against the giants. The Japanese troops lost more than half of their squad in that battle, with some of the soldiers carried away by the giants, while some hid. The encounters left an indelible mark on the troops, many of whom spoke of the difficulty in sleeping as they were haunted by the echoes of their comrades' screams. And even if you don't believe this story, one thing is certain, and it's in the records. The Japanese, who are known for choosing death over defeat, abandoned a mission and went home. Of course, with every story, legend, folklore, and tale told, there are always those who tend to stay on the side of provided facts and evidence, which I have to admit is something this story struggles with. For example, the Japanese story sounds iffy because, to start with, the islands have been inhabited by people for at least 32,000 years. And not only that, in the 50s and 60s, the area was thoroughly mapped out in search of mineral resources. Remember that people believed the story of Mendanya, and these people and corporations took their time with their exploration and exploitation till they had more than enough before leaving. It's also possible that the Japanese fought the indigenous people, and they used jungle warfare and tactics to defeat the Japanese soldiers, just like with Vietnam. And unfortunately, some of these natives were cannibals, which would explain the eating of people, which also brings me to the next point. For critics, and I won't lie, they made a lot of sense with this theory, and it's as simple as saying they met a really tall person. Stay with me. Gigantism was an issue in the past, and due to a lack of medical innovation, a lot of people just kept growing. Gigantism, also called pediatric acromegaly and pituitary gigantism, is a very rare condition that happens when a child or adolescent has high levels of growth hormones in their body, which causes them to grow very tall, or worse, just keep growing nonstop. History has recorded a lot of individuals that are so tall that you could easily classify them as giants. Robert Wadlow, an American who was 8 feet 11 inches tall, is an example of this. Robert Wadlow was the tallest person who ever lived, and he never stopped growing until he died. While the tallest person who is still alive is a farmer from Turkey named Sultan Kusin. He is 8 feet 2 inches tall, which automatically makes him a Guinness World Record holder. He has the record for the world's biggest hand at an outstanding 27.5 centimeters and the world's second biggest feet at 36.5 centimeters. He had to undergo medical surgery to stop growing because it affected the quality of his life. So again, imagine seeing Sultan Kusin coming right at you in a jungle. I personally would yell at the top of my voice, shouting, "Giants? The giants are here?" Honestly, I personally still marvel at the heights of basketball players. Those beings are too tall. I mean, look at these staggering differences. I don't know about you, but this certainly classifies as giant to me, and that could be what happened back then. Take a look at Georgi Muresan, who is 7 feet 7 inches tall. Certainly, in the next 200 years, if someone finds his grave with just his leg bone taller than half the population in the world, they would also think giants existed, and their being in the NBA proves that giants are athletic. They could run, easily drag you off to their hideout, and basically do what they want with you. And it didn't help matters that throughout history, there were a lot of con artists and liars who said they found giants and even took pictures with the bones, only to find out that the bones are glued together to create that height, or worse, photoshopped. One of the most well-known archaeological scams in American history was the Cardiff Giant. It was a 10-foot tall and about 3,000-pound petrified man that was found on October 16, 1869, by people digging a well behind the barn of William Newell's house in Cardiff, New York. After it was found, it soon became an attraction site. The belief became so widespread that President Abraham Lincoln referenced the lost race of giants, along with extinct mastodons, when describing the age of Niagara Falls. The crazy thing was that the person who planned the whole thing, George Hull, did it to prove a point that people can easily be deceived. Hull, who was an atheist, got into a fight with Reverend Turk and his followers at a Methodist revival meeting over Genesis 6:4, which says that giants used to live on earth, and they were known as Nephilim, an offspring of an unholy union between angels and women. And the Reverend connected the sightings reported in the newspaper with the Bible, insinuating that the Bible events are real. Hull lost the case of proving that what was written in the papers was a lie. Hull was mad that he lost, so he wanted to show how easy it was for people to be tricked. In 1868, Hull and another man named H.B. Martin hired men to cut out a 10-foot, 4.5-inch block of gypsum in Fort Dodge, Iowa. A lot of different acids and stains were used to make the giant look old and worn. In November 1868, Hull took the giant to his cousin William Newell's farm by train. He spent a total of $2,600 on the hoax, which is about $60,000 by today's standards. The giant was buried in a hole on Newell's farm one night in late November 1868. Nearly a year later, on October 16, 1869, Newell hired Gideon Emmons and Henry Nichols to dig a well, and that's when they found the giant. And he was right. People ate it up. In such, I'm pretty sure you've seen this image. One was so good that I actually believed it, but it was all a lie. Surprisingly enough, these images were not made to trick or fake anyone but for a Photoshop contest. Some of them were made by the Weekly World News, a trashy newspaper that often puts out jokes and hoaxes for people to laugh at. But some people thought the pictures were real and shared them on the internet, and it just kept going on. This is why most skeptics don't believe in the giant story. How can you tell the difference between the real stories and the fake ones? It would be stupid to think that the world is just as it seems. Even after telling this story, I can't help but feel like I have only just scratched the surface.